Hey guys, tonight we slip into a toga, sip some nectar, and sneak into the most exclusive wedding in mythology. The music's soft and harp-heavy, the ambrosia flows like prosecco at a vineyard brunch, and every Greek god is here looking their divine best. You spot Poseidon polishing his trident unnecessarily. Dionysus is already tipsy, obviously. Even Hades showed up, wearing black on black like it's a funeral, not a party. The occasion. The wedding of Peleus, a mortal hero, and Thetis, a sea nymph with serious mood swings and shape-shifting tendencies. A rare mortal divine pairing that, if you're being honest, seems destined for some epic baggage. But tonight is for love, shiny gifts, and dangerously vague prophecies. As you shuffle closer to the golden-lit banquet table, careful not to trip on anyone's flowing robe, you notice an uncomfortable ripple moving through the crowd. It's not the scent of Poseidon's questionable cologne. No, this is social tension. A certain someone hasn't been invited. Someone who really doesn't take well to being ignored. You probably won't survive this, by the way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Because just as you're admiring Hera's peacock feather headdress, the air thickens. There's a pop. A flicker. Then, boom. Discord has arrived. Eris, goddess of petty drama, steps into the wedding like she's in a slow-motion soap opera. She wasn't on the guest list, and frankly, she's a little hurt. You see, Eris has this habit of stirring up tension. Not in a fun, game night kind of way. More like, let's see how fast I can turn gods against each other using only passive-aggressive gifts energy. She doesn't say anything. Doesn't scream or curse. Just walks in, tosses something sparkling onto the banquet table, and disappears into the night like a mythological mic drop. Everyone leans in. Nestled among the figs and roast boar is a golden apple. Not just any apple. Etched into its polished skin are three immortal words, to the Fairest. And that, my friend, is where the party ends and the long, melodramatic unraveling of history begins. Hera sees the apple and narrows her eyes. She's Zeus's wife, queen of the gods, and not exactly known for her chill. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, straightens her olive wreath and pretends not to care, but she's calculating. Aphrodite, goddess of love, bats her lashes and smirks like she already knows where this is going. The rest of the guests. Quietly scooting their chairs back. You try to blend into the marble columns, but it's too late. The three goddesses are locked in what you can only describe as a high-stakes silent standoff. You could cut the tension with Apollo's lyre string. Now, mainstream history tells us this moment kicks off the chain of events that leads to the Trojan War. But less discussed is how the entire thing hinges on divine egos and one objectively unhelpful fruit. Here's the thing. Historians and classicists still argue whether Eris intended to incite war, or if she just wanted to humiliate someone on a Tuesday. Some say she represents the inevitable entropy of the world, a personified force of chaos that balances order. Others say she's just the mythological equivalent of someone subtweeting at a wedding. Regardless, the damage is done. The three goddesses all believe they deserve the title of Fairest. And none of them is willing to back down. Which, if you've ever tried to referee an argument between three self-declared queens, you know, this is not going to resolve itself quietly. Zeus, watching from his golden throne, casually sips his ambrosia and mutters something about not getting involved in girl drama. Because of course. Meanwhile, the apple glows gently in the firelight. Silent. Innocent. But already the most dangerous piece of produce in history. As night falls on the wedding, no one's dancing. The bride and groom are forgotten. And somewhere in the heavens, the wheels of fate begin their long, creaky spin toward 10 years of war, thousands of deaths, and one very questionable wooden horse. But we're not there yet. First, the gods need a judge. And Zeus. He is just the mortal in mind. You'd think gods, being eternal and theoretically wise, could resolve disputes with some level of grace. Maybe a calm vote. A celestial bake-off. But no, this is Olympus, and when pride is bruised, logic takes a vacation. The apple still glints on the table like a smug little trophy. To the fairest. Just 3 words, but they land like a thunderbolt to the collective ego. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite now stand shoulder to shoulder, back straight, arms crossed. If gods had sweat glands, this would be a very moist situation. Hera breaks first. Obviously it's mine, she says, in that tone of voice that makes it clear she expects no disagreement. Queen of the heavens, wife of Zeus, embodiment of dignity. Her voice drips with royal indignation. It's like she's trying to will the apple into her handbag. Athena's laugh is sharp. Dignity doesn't win wars. Wisdom does. She gestures to her owl, who somehow looks smug too. Besides, beauty fades. Strategy. Eternal. Aphrodite sighs the way only a love goddess can. Ladies, ladies. This is adorable. But let's be honest. When mortals build temples, they don't pray for strength or cleverness. They pray for passion. Desire. Me. And just like that, the golden apple becomes the most expensive piece of fruit-related drama until Gwyneth Paltrow's candle line. Now, Zeus, being Zeus, doesn't want any part of this. He knows better than to crown one woman beautiful while snubbing 2 others who have lightning-level grudges and the ability to smite his favorite cities. He mutters something vague about needing to go water the cosmos and casually nominates a mortal to handle the issue. His choice. Paris. A Trojan prince, currently disguised as a shepherd because his own parents abandoned him on a mountain. Long story. We'll get there. Back to Eris for a second. Most myths gloss over what she does after the apple drop. But fringe versions suggest she might have stuck around to watch the fallout. Some even say she planted herself behind a column with popcorn. Historians still debate whether Eris is a true villain or just a cosmic agent of balance, chaos where chaos is due. You, meanwhile, try not to make eye contact with anyone. The party has devolved into a divine Cold War. Hermes, ever the messenger, is dispatched to fetch Paris. Poor guy probably thought he'd be delivering scrolls or guiding souls today, not dragging a goat-herding mortal into a celestial beauty pageant. But Hermes, professional that he is, doesn't ask questions. With a flash of winged sandals and a smirk that suggests he's seen worse, he zips down from Olympus in search of the most oblivious prince in the Aegean. As for the other gods, they start placing bets. Back on Olympus, the mood has shifted. You wander through the marble halls, past mosaics depicting past heroic feats and divine scandals, Zeus turning into a swan, Dionysus inventing hangovers, Hera throwing lightning in a rage over Zeus turning into a swan. You know, normal mythological stuff. The 3 goddesses are prepping for judgment like they're on the divine next top model. Hera polishes her crown and prepares a list of kingdoms she can offer. Athena sharpens her spear while reciting a speech about glory and wisdom. Aphrodite doesn't do much, just lies on a chaise lounge like she already knows she's won. There's a pause in the chaos. A moment where Olympus holds its breath. Even the peacocks seem to sense it. The apple remains, glittering under torchlight. Cold. Heavy with consequence. What's funny is that the mortals below have no idea what's about to be set in motion. Kings are eating olives, builders are raising temples, soldiers are sharpening swords for skirmishes that seem totally unrelated. But soon, all of Greece will bend toward this single, shiny insult. You sip watered wine and watch as Hermes reappears. The goddesses follow, ready to charm, argue, bribe, or intimidate. They vanish into the clouds, heading for a lonely shepherd boy with absolutely no clue what's about to land on his hillside. You might be wondering, why Paris? Why a mortal and not, say, a neutral god? Or a celestial parrot? Well, some scholars say it was fate. Others point to an earlier prophecy about Paris being the ruin of Troy. Some even whisper Zeus just wanted to watch things burn from a safe distance. Either way, the choice is made. The apple will be judged. The goddesses are ready. And poor Paris. He's still counting sheep. You're sitting now on the edge of Mount Ida, just above the plains of Troy, where the clouds kiss the pines and the air smells like goat sweat and wild thyme. A soft breeze hums through the grass. Birds chirp without knowing that three immortals are about to crash this peaceful scene. Down the hill, Paris lounges lazily beneath an olive tree. He's in that half-nap state where you're technically awake but morally asleep. His sheep are bleating somewhere in the distance, but he's too busy wondering if lunch should be figs or honey bread. You know, real prince problems. Then, flash. A winged figure touches down with the graceful chaos of a hummingbird who also happens to be wearing sandals. Hermes appears, looking impossibly unruffled for someone escorting three of the universe's most competitive women. Rise and shine, Paris, Hermes says. You've got guests. Paris squints up at the divine entourage and blinks. Not every day you see three glowing figures gliding down from Olympus like some sparkly celestial jury panel. It's Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, in full glamour mode. They don't walk, they float. Their hair catches the light just right. Even the sheep stop chewing. Now, pause. Imagine being told that the gods have picked you to settle a divine beauty contest. That your decision may determine the fate of nations, cities, even civilizations. And all this before you've had breakfast. Paris stammers something like, and, wow, while brushing crumbs off his tunic. He's given a single instruction: choose who gets the golden apple. The Fairest. You'd expect a mortal to panic. But Paris was raised by shepherds, and shepherds are good at hiding discomfort behind slow nods. Still, his eyebrows are locked in that subtle expression of, please let this be a dream. The goddesses don't waste time. They go straight to the bribes. Hera steps forward first, regal and towering. Choose me, she says, and I'll make you ruler of the known world. Asia, Europe, all of it. You'll sit on a throne taller than any mountain, your name chanted in every port. Paris nods slowly. Power's nice. Then Athena steps in. Pick me, she says, and I'll make you the wisest man alive. No army could beat you, no riddle stump you. You'll be a legend among kings and philosophers. Paris raises one eyebrow. Immortal intellect sounds useful, especially during sheep-related disputes. Then comes Aphrodite. She smiles, and the air gets warmer. Flowers bloom out of season. Bees pause mid-flight. I'll give you the most beautiful woman in the world, she says, voice soft as silk over river stones. Her name is Helen. Historians still argue whether Paris was swayed by love, lust, or simply the awkwardness of saying no to a goddess whose eyelids twinkle. Either way, he hands the apple to Aphrodite. There's a pause, a tiny breath between thunderclaps. Aphrodite grins. Hera and Athena freeze, faces set like chipped marble. Then they vanish, each with a polite-ish goodbye that makes it very clear Paris should never vacation in Olympus again. And just like that, the apple is claimed. Now, a bit of fringe history for you. Some lesser-known versions of the myth claim Paris hesitated longer, asking for demonstrations or interviews. One particularly odd version insists Athena challenged him to a riddle contest first, which he lost spectacularly. Another suggests Hera offered him eternal bacon. None of these made the official cut, but they make excellent fireside retellings. Back to the narrative. The die is cast. Aphrodite, now winner of this glittering insult tournament, begins arranging for Paris to meet Helen. There's just one problem: Helen is already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. Awkward. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Paris, a mortal prince raised in obscurity, is about to step onto the main stage of Greek myth. He doesn't know it yet, but this single choice will lead to a decade-long war, thousands of deaths, and a horse-related prank that earns a permanent place in every history curriculum. And you? You're still sitting beneath that olive tree, feeling the last glow of Aphrodite's charm, wondering if picking her really was the wisest move. But hey, the promise of love has toppled empires before. Hermes shrugs and vanishes. The goddesses are gone. The sheep resume grazing like none of this ever happened. But somewhere deep in the folds of the mythic world, gears begin to turn. Ships will be launched. Spears will be raised. All for the sake of one golden apple. You're in Sparta now, where the sun reflects off polished marble and bare chests equally. The city's air smells of olive oil, competition, and lightly scorched ambition. You can almost hear sandals slapping against stone as warriors jog uphill just because it's there. Inside the palace, things are surprisingly calm. Helen, yes, that Helen, is lounging in a shaded courtyard, twirling a grape between two fingers and trying not to look bored. She is beautiful, not in the loud, glittery way you might expect, but in a still, silent sort of way, like moonlight on water. You don't need a herald to tell you who she is. You know. Menelaus, her husband, is out of town. Trade mission. Something about barley, or sheep tariffs, it's never just relaxing in Sparta. Enter Paris. The moment he arrives in Sparta, Aphrodite makes sure he doesn't trip over his own charm. He walks in like he's already been rehearsing this moment in front of a mirror. Tall, tanned, draped in the kind of tunic that says, "I'm foreign, but tastefully so." He smells like cedar and confidence. And if you squint, you might notice a tiny divine shimmer still lingering around his cheekbones. Aphrodite really wants this meeting to go well. When Paris and Helen lock eyes, the world seems to pause. Not in the poetic, oh, love at first sight way. More in the, wait, this is how the Trojan War starts, way. There's tension, yes, but also disbelief. Imagine knowing your life is about to become legend and still wondering whether your tunic is wrinkled. Now, historians still argue whether Helen truly fell for Paris, or whether Aphrodite made her. Some say Helen was enchanted. Others insist she went willingly, tired of her carefully curated Spartan life. And then there's the more cynical school of thought, that Helen saw in Paris not a lover, but an exit strategy. Either way, they vanished together not long after. Some say he stole her. Others say she left. Let's just say the truth probably lies somewhere in the poetic gray area. Fringe trivia. Oh, this one's fun. A few ancient sources claimed Helen never went to Troy at all. They say a phantom double, yes, like a mystical body double made of clouds, was sent to Troy instead, while the real Helen was whisked off to Egypt for safekeeping. It's niche, yes, but it makes for a spicy alternate ending. But back to our main thread. Paris and Helen flee. Their ship cuts across the Aegean like a scandal in motion. The oars beat a steady rhythm, the wind lifts their sails, and the stars above blink in mild disapproval. Meanwhile, Menelaus returns home to find an empty room, a few panicked servants, and the echoes of recent passion. There's no dramatic note, no divine intervention visible, just one big, fat insult with golden undertones. Menelaus doesn't scream. He doesn't faint. Instead, he does what Spartans do best: he plans revenge while sharpening something. Soon, the signal fires are lit. And oh, they burn bright. Across the hills and coasts of Greece, word spreads like an overdue drama. Helen has been taken, they say. Paris has dishonored Menelaus. Aphrodite's fingerprints are all over this. Now, here comes a fascinating piece of nuance. Technically, Helen wasn't just Menelaus's wife, she was a shared promise. Before marrying her, all of her suitors had sworn an oath to defend whoever she chose. Think of it as the ancient Greek version of bros before matrimonial abductions. So when Menelaus calls in that favor, kings come running, not necessarily because they care about him, but because honor, glory, and a chance to flex their war muscles in a justifiable way. That's practically currency in Bronze Age Greece. Agamemnon, Odysseus, Achilles, even poor Ajax the Lesser, each gets roped in. Some willingly, others not. Odysseus, for example, famously tried to dodge the draft by pretending to be insane. He plowed his fields with salt until someone tossed his baby in front of the plow to test his madness. Spoiler, he swerved. Drafted. Soon, fleets are being assembled, spears counted, tunics stitched with team logos. The Greek world is mobilizing. And Paris? He's polishing his hair and trying not to notice the distant drumbeat of retribution sailing his way. Back in Troy, King Priam welcomes Helen like a glittering prize. She's given chambers, attendants, perfume probably made from crushed orchids and whispered apologies. The Trojans are divided, some thrilled to have the legendary beauty as a guest, others sensing the divine storm brewing offshore. And you, listener, are drifting now through the Aegean night, sails snapping overhead, as 1,000 ships prepare to chase one golden apple's fallout. Helen watches the horizon with unreadable eyes. Paris thinks this still might somehow work out. And Menelaus is sharpening something new. The war drums haven't started just yet, but oh, the sound of boots being polished. That's getting louder. You're in Mycenae now, where Agamemnon, king, warrior, and professionally dramatic older brother, is preparing to launch the grandest coalition Greece has ever seen. His jaw is permanently clenched, his cloak a bit too stiff, and his ego larger than the fleet he's organizing. You'd think assembling an army of the most famous heroes in Greek history would be like calling in a few favors. Instead, it's more like herding extremely muscular cats with trust issues. First up, Achilles. Barely out of his teens, and already being whispered about like some half-divine Marvel character. Achilles doesn't even want to go at first. His mother, Thetis, the sea nymph with a talent for foreboding, has a vision: if he joins this war, he'll earn eternal glory, but die young. Achilles, lounging somewhere in Skyros, is reportedly cross-dressing as a princess to avoid conscription. Honestly, a bold strategy. So, Odysseus is sent to fetch him. Odysseus is clever, of course, he doesn't just knock and demand. No, he brings shiny weapons, trinkets, and lays them among girly things. When Achilles instinctively grabs the sword, boom, caught. Drafted. No more dresses. Just bronze armor and centuries of literary fame ahead. Historians still argue whether Achilles ever actually disguised himself, or if this is just one of those mythic embellishments. Either way, the image of the greatest Greek warrior playing pretend in a tiara is oddly charming. Meanwhile, Odysseus himself had tried his own draft-dodging scheme, remember the salt-plowing stunt? But that failed, so now he's reluctantly packed up his loyal dog, bid his wife Penelope goodbye, and muttered something like, "This better be over in a month." Spoiler, it's not. Ships are being hauled into the sea, hulls tarred, sails stitched with symbols of house pride. Some warriors bring spears. Others bring lyres. All bring egos. Agamemnon, trying to play alpha, issues a grand order: the Greeks will set sail from Aulis, a port city where the wind has mysteriously stopped. Like, totally dead calm. Imagine thousands of warriors, stuck together on the beach for weeks, all eating olives and glaring at each other. You can almost hear it now, seagulls crying overhead, men grumbling about rations, and somewhere, Achilles demanding better footrests. Here comes the twist, the wind's silence isn't natural. According to legend, it's divine punishment. You see, Agamemnon did a foolish thing. On a previous hunting trip, he shot a sacred deer that belonged to Artemis, goddess of the hunt and general grudge holder. Worse, he bragged about it. So Artemis, in full myth mode, demands compensation, the sacrifice of Agamemnon's daughter, Iphigenia. Yes, really. Not a deer. Not a prayer. A daughter. Historians still debate how this story was originally told. Some versions say Iphigenia is saved at the last minute by a divine switcheroo involving a deer double. Others say she dies, tragically, nobly, silently. And some fringe versions suggest she was spirited away to become a priestess in far-off Taurus. The ancient record, like many things Greek, is just a bit flexible. Regardless, the sacrifice, real or feigned, breaks the still air. The wind stirs. Ships begin to launch, slicing the sea in tight formation. The horizon fills with sails, each one whispering of vengeance, honor, and a golden apple's absurd fallout. It's like watching an empire float. As the fleet approaches Troy, you might imagine fanfare. Instead, there's confusion. The Greeks accidentally land, in the wrong place. Yep. A minor port. They sack a city that's definitely not Troy, then realize the mistake. Oops. Adjust course. Finally, Troy appears. High walls rise against the horizon, impossibly tall, reinforced by Poseidon himself, if the myths are to be believed. Within them, the Trojan royals. King Priam, gray-bearded and tired. Hecuba, his queen, sharpening side eye. And Hector, Paris's older brother, already halfway into a stress ulcer. Troy is no pushover. This isn't a rustic village, they're rich, organized, and ready to fight. Bronze gleams on towers. Archers peer down from battlements. The city tightens its grip on Helen, who watches silently from a high balcony, caught in the eye of a storm she may or may not have chosen. And you, floating quietly behind the Greek fleet, feel the first drop of rain. The war hasn't started yet, not officially. But the gods are leaning in. The mortals are lined up. The chessboard is set, and someone just tipped over the first pawn. You don't exactly storm the gates of Troy on day one. No, first you set up camp. For a 10-year siege. You can picture it, can't you? Thousands of warriors, all promise glory, all itching for battle, reduced to hammering tent poles into foreign sand, complaining about the heat, and stealing each other's wine. The war, in its earliest stages, is less about swordplay and more about supply chains. The Greeks construct a massive camp along the shore, essentially a pop-up Bronze Age suburb. Each king or chieftain commands his own unit, with his own tents, servants, horses, and flair for decor. Achilles and his myrmidons have sleek black sails and sleek black moods. Ajax, towering and not particularly chatty, uses his spear as a curtain rod. Odysseus mutters clever insults while quietly organizing food schedules. Agamemnon has the largest tent, of course, and the most uncomfortable vibe. Troy, meanwhile, watches from atop its walls. The Trojans aren't naive. They know a siege when they see one. But they also know that these Greek kings don't exactly get along. So they bide their time, reinforce their gates, and maybe pop a little popcorn. The early years of the war are filled with strange rhythms. Skirmishes break out along the plain, quick, brutal, flashy, but they never quite tip the scales. Heroes duel in the no man's land between camp and city, exchanging taunts before clashing. Then there are truces, long talks, even parties. There's a surreal politeness to it all. Nobody wants to destroy the legend before it's ripe. One of the earliest oddities. The sides are flexible. Several Trojan allies arrive from neighboring regions, including the Amazons, yes, the legendary warrior women, led by Queen Penthesilea. Historians still argue whether she was real or a poetic invention, but the visual is fantastic, a line of horsewomen, spears gleaming, galloping across the Anatolian plain. If you squint hard enough, you might even hear Beyoncé playing softly in the distance. Other allies include Memnon, the Ethiopian king and son of the goddess Eos. He brings not only elite troops but also one of the earliest mentions of African warriors in Greek myth. Memnon is a formidable presence, noble, tragic, and destined to clash with Achilles in a duel sung for generations. But before we get there, let's talk camp life. This isn't a weekend festival, it's 10 years of boredom interrupted by poetry, plague, and personality clashes. Greeks argue over spoils, sing long songs about themselves, and engage in endless contests of who can sulk the hardest. Achilles usually wins. There's also disease. At one point, a plague ravages the Greek camp. Corpses pile up, morale nosedives, and everyone starts looking suspiciously at Agamemnon. Turns out, he's offended Apollo by stealing a priest's daughter as a war prize. Apollo, being the petty Olympian he is, responds with arrows of pestilence. It's not subtle. To fix things, Agamemnon is told to give the girl back. He agrees, sort of, but demands a replacement. And who does he choose? Achilles' war prize. Yeah. That goes over extremely well. Achilles, already the most emotionally volatile man on the beach, does not take this lightly. He withdraws from battle entirely, takes his men with him, and sits in his tent, stewing in silent rage. For chapters. This withdrawal is a turning point, not because of the politics, but because of the sheer drama. Achilles, the strongest warrior, is out of the fight. The Greeks flounder without him. Morale sinks. Skirmishes are lost. And over in Troy, Hector begins to believe they just might outlast this ridiculous war. Hector, noble and doomed, becomes the Trojans' main champion. He doesn't have Achilles' divine lineage or Odysseus' tricks, but he's loyal, brave, and entirely human. He fights for family, not fame. He kisses his son on the battlements, says goodbye to his wife, and rides out to battle with a heart full of duty. Meanwhile, back in the Greek camp, the tension is thick. Think middle school sleepaway camp but with more bronze and brooding. Achilles broods. Patroclus, his companion, watches him with growing concern. The other kings try not to mention the whole "you stole his girlfriend" situation. And all the while, Helen still sits within Troy's high walls, silent and enigmatic. Historians still debate her role. Was she a seductress, a captive, or just a scapegoat in a cosmic game? Some say she regrets nothing. Others, everything. Night falls often on the Trojan plain, but the war barely moves. It becomes background noise, something you live around. Spears rattle, armor rusts, and men grow older beneath a sky that no longer promises swift victory. Until, at last, someone decides to break the stalemate. Not with tactics. Not with strategy. But with grief. You don't really plan for grief in war, not the kind that rearranges your bones and rewrites your choices. And yet, that's what finally gets Achilles back on the field. Not honor, not pride. But the death of the only person who could make him laugh through clenched teeth, Patroclus. Now, who exactly Patroclus is to Achilles, that depends on which ancient poet you ask. Some call them cousins. Others say they're childhood companions. And then there's that whole school of thought that suggests the two were lovers, bound not just by arms but by hearts. Historians still argue whether theirs was a romantic bond or a deep platonic soul tie, but what nobody doubts is this: when Patroclus dies, Achilles breaks. Here's how it happens. With the Greek forces faltering, thanks to Achilles' epic sulk, Patroclus decides to act. He puts on Achilles' armor, rallies the Myrmidons, and leads a charge into battle. For a while, it works. The Trojans are thrown into confusion, thinking Achilles has returned. They fall back. The Greeks surge forward. For the first time in weeks, the tide turns. But it's temporary. Because then Hector spots him. And Hector, dutiful and determined, does what any great warrior would do: he takes down the man in front of him. The problem? That man wasn't Achilles. It was his heart. The news hits Achilles like a landslide. You don't see it, but you feel it, like the air thickens and the drums stop. Achilles doesn't weep, not right away. He just stares. And when he moves again, he doesn't walk, he storms. First, he screams. So loud, it said the sea hears him. Thetis, his mother, rises from the waves and brings him new armor, forged by Hephaestus himself. It's so shiny, it blinds enemies just to look at it. And then Achilles returns. But this isn't the Achilles you remember. He doesn't fight like a hero anymore, he fights like a force of nature. He cuts through Trojan ranks like wind through dry leaves. People run before they even see him. It's not honor driving him now, it's fury. Bare, raw, and bottomless. And eventually, he finds Hector. The duel is brutal. Not flashy or poetic, just inevitable. Hector knows what's coming. He tries to reason with Achilles, even asks that their bodies be returned to their families. But Achilles refuses. He's not here for noble gestures. He's here to avenge a friend. When Hector falls, Achilles doesn't stop. He ties the body to his chariot, drags it around the walls of Troy, and lets his grief curdle into rage. It's the ugliest moment in a story filled with beautiful ones. Even the gods turn their faces away. But here's where it gets unexpectedly tender. Hector's father, old King Priam, does something unthinkable. Under the cover of night, he sneaks into the Greek camp. Alone. No weapons. Just age, courage, and grief. He kneels before Achilles. And he begs for his son's body. There's a silence in that tent so thick you could bottle it. Then Achilles does something else unthinkable. He weeps. Not loud, not dramatic. Just, quietly. As if something inside him finally gives way. He gives Hector's body back. He allows time for mourning. And for a brief moment, the war pauses. The two men sit in the flickering light, one mourning a son, the other a friend. And somewhere in the distance, the sea breathes. This part of the story has always haunted people. Because it's not a victory. It's not even forgiveness. It's just two broken men, sharing the weight of what war has taken from them. Achilles won't live long after this. He knows it. The gods have whispered it, and fate has woven it in golden thread. But for now, he stays still. For now, he allows the quiet. Outside, the campfires flicker. Inside, a prince is returned to his home. And deep in the heart of Troy, Helen looks out over the walls, wondering how much more beauty must be broken before the gods are satisfied. There's a kind of hush that settles over Troy after Hector's funeral. A fragile, grieving quiet, like the city itself is exhaling after years of holding its breath. You might imagine this would be the turning point, the start of something softer. But this is myth, not bedtime poetry. And in myths, grief rarely leads to peace. It leads to vengeance. Achilles, despite the moment of tenderness with Priam, isn't done. Not by a long shot. His rage is still bubbling under the surface, and the gods. Oh, they're still watching, still meddling, still bickering in their golden halls. Zeus, for example, is getting tired. Tired of watching mortals bleed for a stolen woman. Tired of seeing Olympus divided like a petty high school lunchroom. Some sources say he started pushing for a finale. It's been 10 years, after all. Even drama needs an endpoint. And that ending is inching closer now, because there's a new player about to arrive on the battlefield, Paris's arrow. But let's not rush. There's a little more pageantry left to enjoy. Achilles goes on a killing spree post-Hector. A polished, brutal, unrelenting spree. He even fights the river god's commander, yes, an actual river, because the bodies he slaughtered are starting to clog its flow. You can picture it, a warrior waist-deep in water, cursing a literal stream for daring to fight back. Fringe fact. In some versions, the river nearly wins. Achilles has to be saved by Hera and Poseidon before he gets swept away like a piece of old laundry. The gods, remember, are still choosing sides like it's dodgeball. Then comes the moment that wraps Achilles' fate in a tight golden bow. He meets Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons. A fierce, glorious warrior, so skilled she nearly matches him. And as Achilles strikes her down, something odd happens. He sees her face and falters. According to some ancient poets, he falls for her in that moment. Just as she dies. Historians still argue whether that was love, shock, or simply poetic flair added centuries later. But either way, the moment unsettles him. It's a reminder that even his greatest strength, his unmatched ability to kill, can betray him. Still, he marches on. Until one day, he doesn't. You've probably heard the phrase, Achilles' heel. It's the kind of myth that sticks, even in high school vocab lists. But the story behind it? Surprisingly vague. You see, Paris, yes, the golden apple guy, the one who started this whole mess, finally picks up a bow. Now, Paris isn't exactly known for his bravery. He's more a hot boy with great hair than a battle-hardened warrior. But with the help of Apollo, who guides the arrow, he lands a perfect shot. Right in Achilles' heel. The only vulnerable part of the man. A spot his mother missed when she dipped him into the river Styx to make him invincible. Or, if you follow other versions, the heel is just symbolic, he wasn't ever invulnerable, just extremely hard to kill. Either way, Achilles falls. And the world around him goes oddly quiet. There's no thunderclap. No trumpet of doom. Just a warrior, bleeding into the soil, realizing that even legends have expiration dates. His death throws the Greek camp into mourning. And chaos. Especially because there's now a new problem, who gets Achilles' armor? You'd think they'd pause for a day or two to grieve. Maybe light a few fires, sing a sad song. But no. Ajax and Odysseus immediately start bickering over who's worthy enough to wear the shiny, god-forged armor. Ajax, giant and stoic, argues it should be based on strength and loyalty. Odysseus, crafty and silver-tongued, says it should go to the cleverest, the one who can win the war. The Greeks vote. Odysseus wins. Ajax snaps. Not loudly. Not publicly. He simply unravels. In a version of the myth that stings more than most, Ajax plans revenge. But the gods cloud his mind. He ends up killing a herd of sheep, thinking they're Greek leaders. When he realizes what he's done, shame crushes him. And he falls on his own sword. Two of the greatest Greek heroes, gone. One by arrow. One by madness. The Trojans aren't celebrating, though. They know what's coming. Because the Greeks still have one final play. A trick so cunning, so legendary, that even thousands of years later, its silhouette still shows up in cartoons and political metaphors. But let's not climb into the horse just yet. Let's pause here, in the aftermath of Achilles. The Myrmidons silent, their golden leader gone. The Trojans peering over the walls, unsure whether to hope or fear. And Helen, still watching, still waiting. Because when you start a war over a golden apple, it rarely ends with gold. So here you are, wandering through a Greek war camp where the fires burn lower and quieter now. The great Achilles is gone. Ajax, too. And you can almost hear the whispers, has the war lost its spark? Not quite. Because Odysseus, the man who wins arguments with words sharper than any sword, is not ready to go home empty-handed. He's already scheming, fiddling with bits of wood, sketching plans in the dust, and mumbling ideas that sound more like bedtime riddles than battle strategies. You've probably guessed where this is going. This is the part with the horse. But let's not reduce it to just a giant wooden animal full of sweaty dudes. Because the Trojan horse is a masterclass in manipulation, design, and let's be honest, a last-ditch act of desperation disguised as brilliance. Here's the setup: the Greeks pretend to give up. They burn their tents, smash their cooking pots, and sail away, leaving behind nothing but a giant wooden horse standing in the sand like a forgotten art installation. Only it's not forgotten. It's very, very deliberate. Inside are the best warriors, Odysseus among them, of course, curled up like sardines, swords in hand, holding their breath. And outside, a single Greek named Sinon. His job: convince the Trojans to drag the horse into the city. Now, you'd think after 10 years of war, the Trojans might be a little suspicious. A little too tired to be tricked. But Sinon spins a tale so emotionally juicy, so soaked in tears and noble sacrifice, that they buy it. He claims the horse is an offering to Athena, and if the Trojans bring it inside their walls, they'll win her favor. Of course, he doesn't mention the cramped murder men inside. And here comes the fringe fact: some versions say a priest named Laocoon did try to warn the Trojans. He allegedly shouted, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." You know, that line. But then, this is where it gets weird: 2 sea serpents slither out of the ocean and strangle him and his sons right there on the beach. Historians still argue whether this was divine punishment or just the ancient version of getting accidentally silenced by the powers that be. But the Trojans take it as a sign. They pull the horse inside. And what a party follows. They drink, they dance, they laugh. After a decade of siege, the city finally breathes. You might imagine Helen standing at a balcony, wine in hand, glancing at that horse with narrowed eyes. Some versions even say she circled it, mimicking Greek wives' voices, trying to draw the hidden soldiers out. Did she suspect the trick? Or was she, too, just tired of all of it? Night falls. The fires burn low. And inside that hollow horse, 100 warriors slowly uncurl their stiff limbs and open a trapdoor in the belly of a lie. They slip down ropes. Open the gates. Signal to the Greek ships, which have returned under cover of darkness. The city, still drunk on relief, is suddenly a stage for flames and swords. You can hear it, the distant clash, the shouts, the crumbling of marble and wood. Priam, the king, is dragged from an altar. Hecuba cries for her sons. Cassandra, cursed to always be right and never believed, screams warnings that come too late, again. It's brutal. But not loud, somehow. The stories tell of rage, but also of quiet horror. Of familiar streets lit with fire instead of lamplight. Of temples defiled and children stolen. And Helen. Here's where the versions split. Some say she rejoices. That she secretly helped the Greeks win. Others say she weeps, realizing the cost of a golden apple and a stolen night. One thread suggests she walks quietly through the smoke to Menelaus, her original husband, who raises his sword to kill her, but hesitates. She removes her robe, showing him she is still beautiful, still Helen. And he lowers his weapon. Historians still argue whether this moment is about forgiveness, fear, or vanity. Maybe all three. But the war, at least, is over. The Greeks, victorious, loot what they can. The walls of Troy, walls said to have been built by Poseidon himself, collapse under the weight of legend and fire. And yet, in the silence that follows, you can't help but feel something unresolved. As if the story isn't quite finished. And that's because it isn't. Not really. The victors must return home now. And for some, the journey will be longer, stranger, and more cursed than the war itself. But for now, picture that wooden horse, empty and scorched, sitting in the rubble. A monument to trickery, vanity, and a feud that began with fruit. The embers of Troy still smolder behind you, but the war drums have finally quieted. You'd think that after 10 years of spear-throwing, oath-breaking, and elaborate god-fueled drama, the victors would get a smooth ride home, right? Yeah, not quite. Welcome to the part of the story that should be the epilogue but somehow turns into a whole sequel. The Greeks, triumphant yet road-weary, begin their journeys back across the sea, and the gods, well, they're still feeling petty. Let's follow Odysseus first. Because his trip home. A logistical disaster wrapped in a mythological fever dream. You climb aboard his ship, decked out with curved prow and crew that's both battle-tested and, let's be honest, emotionally fragile. They're hoping for a straight shot back to Ithaca. But Odysseus, being the favorite of some gods and the arch-nemesis of others, gets the scenic route. And by scenic, we mean cursed. You meet the Lotus Eaters first. Lovely folks, very chill. Almost too chill. They hand out flowers that make you forget why you even wanted to go home in the first place. A few of your crewmates nibble, giggle, and lie down on the beach like it's their permanent vacation. Odysseus has to drag them back on board, like a parent dealing with toddlers at a candy store. Historians still argue whether the lotus was a real narcotic plant or just poetic shorthand for the temptations of complacency. Either way, you probably shouldn't accept snacks from strangers with dreamy eyes and zero urgency. Next stop, the land of the Cyclopes. Ah yes, giant shepherds with one eye and zero manners. You remember Polyphemus, the particularly grouchy one who traps Odysseus and his men in a cave and starts squashing them like grapes for breakfast. Odysseus, of course, uses his wits. He tells the Cyclops his name is Nobody, gets him drunk, blinds him with a red-hot stake, and escapes by clinging to the undersides of sheep. Classic Odysseus move, outsmart the danger, then get cocky. As they sail away, he yells back his real name, because modesty is not his strong suit. This, naturally, enrages Poseidon, who happens to be Polyphemus's dad. So, Poseidon ensures the sea becomes a personal vendetta. Storms rise. Directions get lost. The GPS of the gods goes offline. You stop by Aeolus, the wind god, who gives Odysseus a bag full of breezes, literal wind power in a pouch. But the crew, convinced it's treasure, opens it mid-voyage. Whoosh. Back to square one. You probably sense a pattern. Every time Odysseus gets close to home, something goes terribly, laughably wrong. There's the Laestrygonians, giant cannibals who snack on sailors like popcorn. There's Circe, the enchantress who turns men into pigs, which, let's be honest, may have been an upgrade for some of them. Odysseus resists her magic, they become friendly, and he stays on her island for a year. Time just melts in myths, doesn't it? Then there's the underworld. Yes, that underworld. Odysseus sails there because apparently that's what you do when you need travel advice. He chats with ghosts, his mom, dead warriors, Even the blind prophet Tiresias, who gives vague warnings like, "Don't eat the sun god's cows." Spoiler alert, they eat the cows. One by one, the crew dwindles. Scylla and Charybdis, basically a six-headed monster and a swirling death whirlpool, claim more lives. The survivors are fewer, sadder, and probably wishing they'd taken up pottery instead of war. Eventually, Odysseus ends up on the island of Calypso, a nymph who offers immortality, love, and no war whatsoever. Sounds nice, right? But Odysseus, ever the complicated hero, says no. He still wants home. He still wants Penelope. Historians still argue whether this loyalty is real or just narrative cleanup for his previous detours. Finally, after 8 billion side quests, he washes ashore on Ithaca. Alone. Bearded. Probably sunburnt. But alive. And Ithaca. It's a mess. Suitors have moved into his palace, partying, drinking, and trying to marry Penelope, who's been weaving and unweaving a shroud for years just to stall them. Cue the epic reunion. Odysseus, in disguise, strings his old bow, shoots an arrow through a dozen axe heads, and reclaims his home with a final, sleepy flourish of vengeance. You exhale. Because if anyone deserves a nap, it's this guy. But here's the catch, Odysseus's return isn't even the worst of the Greek homecomings. Agamemnon, for example, comes back only to be murdered in his bath by his wife Clytemnestra and her lover. Turns out, bringing home a new slave girl and sacrificing your daughter before the war doesn't exactly earn you a warm welcome. Helen, meanwhile, is either forgiven or quietly resented forever. Menelaus survives, but it's said his return journey takes nearly as long as Odysseus's, and involves more detours, shipwrecks, and divine grudges. You realize something, the gods might end the war, but they never really let anyone leave it behind. These heroes win battles, but they lose time, friends, dignity. Their stories echo long after the final spear is thrown, echoes that blend with the sound of waves crashing on Greek shores. And through it all, you think back to that golden apple. One fruit. 3 goddesses. One terrible choice. And a world forever altered by vanity and vows. You'd think by now, after all the sieges, betrayals, shipwrecks, and sun gods with sensitive cows, the gods would call it a day. Go back to their lounging and lightning hurling. But you, dear listener, are not quite free of their drama yet. Because the tale of the golden apple didn't just shape the war and the warriors. It rippled through generations, through whispered family curses, royal house feuds, and a cascade of tragedies that kept Greek poets employed for centuries. Let's turn our gaze now to the house of Atreus. This is the family line of Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, and Menelaus, king of Sparta, the 2 brothers who led the Greeks against Troy. And trust me, this clan makes your average soap opera look like a kindergarten birthday party. Your journey begins with Tantalus, the original family embarrassment. He's the guy who tried to feed his son Pelops to the gods just to see if they'd notice. Spoiler, they did. Horrified, the gods brought the boy back to life, but not before one goddess accidentally ate a piece of shoulder, hence why Pelops ends up with a shiny ivory replacement part. Fringe scholars debate whether this myth is an early metaphor for sacrificial rites or just a particularly grim ancient dad joke. Fast forward to Pelops' sons, Atreus and Thyestes. They feud over a kingdom, classic sibling squabble. Atreus gets creative and serves Thyestes a stew made from his own children. Yes, stew. Let's just say it's not the recipe you'd want in a family cookbook. Historians still argue whether this horrific tale emerged from a real dynastic scandal or was retroactively invented to explain how cursed the family tree became. Now, Agamemnon is Atreus' son. And from the moment he steps into the war, the doom is practically tattooed on his forehead. First, he sacrifices his daughter, Iphigenia, to appease Artemis for favorable winds. Not a great start for family harmony. Then, after winning the war, he brings home Cassandra, the Trojan priestess cursed to see the future but never be believed, as a war prize. So when he walks into his palace bath and is murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra, and her new partner Aegisthus, surviving son of Thyestes, by the way, you can't say the writing wasn't on the wall. You, crouched behind a column in the palace corridor, might hear Cassandra scream before she too is silenced. And that quiet, that eerie pause, it's the weight of decades of blood and blame pressing down on marble floors. Their son, Orestes, grows up in exile. Eventually, he returns to avenge his father, kills his mother, then spirals into madness, pursued by the Furies, those terrifying winged goddesses of vengeance who specialize in mother murderers. You try not to make eye contact with them. Their eyes are like molten coal, and they don't blink. Orestes' trial, held in Athens, no less, marks one of mythology's most symbolic moments, when vengeance gives way to justice. Athena herself steps in as judge, casting the final, tie-breaking vote to acquit him. The Furies are renamed the kindly ones, though you suspect they're still fuming under those polite smiles. It's tempting to ask, wait, how does this connect to the golden apple again? And the answer is, everything connects. Because that apple wasn't just the cause of a war, it was a lit match tossed into centuries of tangled wood. Its flame flickered across generations, lighting up palaces, ships, temples, and thrones. Even Paris, who started it all by choosing Aphrodite's bribe, met his end ignobly, shot by the archer Philoctetes with a bow once owned by Heracles. According to some versions, Paris begs his old flame, the nymph Oenone, to heal him. But she, having been abandoned years earlier, refuses. Regret arrives too late, and she eventually throws herself onto his funeral pyre. Love, in these myths, is often sharp-edged and poorly timed. Meanwhile, Helen, somehow, is still radiant. Some say she never went to Troy at all, that a phantom version of her did, and the real Helen waited safely in Egypt. Historians and poets toss this theory back and forth like a mythological hot potato. Herodotus even lends it a moment of credibility, which tells you just how fluid truth was in ancient storytelling. And so you sit, ankle-deep in the dust of Mycenae or Troy or some blurry edge of the Aegean, thinking about how one apple, yes, just one, can cause not just a war, but a lineage of grief, vengeance, and divine chaos. The gods. They're still watching. Maybe from a cloud. Maybe from a statue. Maybe they're done with you for now. But their stories. Their echoes. They're never truly quiet. You're almost at the end of this tangled, sleepy journey through a myth that starts with a golden apple and explodes into a world of gods, heroes, curses, and endless family drama. But before you drift away completely, there's one more curious thread to pull, how this ancient quarrel shaped not just myths but culture, art, and even modern storytelling. Imagine yourself stepping into an ancient Greek symposium. The air is thick with the smell of wine and oil lamps, chatter about philosophy mingling with laughter. Around you, bards and poets recite tales of gods meddling in mortal affairs, heroic exploits, and tragic flaws. The story of the apple is a favorite, a perfect mix of vanity, divine politics, and human folly. This myth became more than bedtime storytelling for the Greeks. It was a way to understand the world, explain why people behave badly, and explore the messy consequences of choices, especially those born out of pride and desire. Fast forward to today. That golden apple shows up everywhere. In Renaissance paintings, Aphrodite's smile sparks the imagination. Artists like Botticelli and Rubens capture her divine beauty and the moment of Paris's choice. The apple becomes a symbol not just of discord but also of temptation and the complexity of human desire. Interestingly, some scholars suggest that the apple might have originally been a pomegranate or even a quince, fruits that held symbolic meaning in ancient Mediterranean cultures. The apple, with its round, shiny, tempting look, just stuck as a symbol over time. This shift shows how myths evolve like living things, changing shape, color, and flavor depending on who's telling the story and when. The story's influence also stretches into literature and modern pop culture. The apple of discord trope pops up in movies, books, and even video games as a metaphor for that one small spark that sets off a chain reaction. Sometimes it's a magical artifact, other times, it's just a small misunderstanding blown way out of proportion. You might recognize echoes of Paris's dilemma in your own life, the moment where a seemingly small choice leads to unexpected drama. The myth whispers a gentle warning: sometimes vanity and petty quarrels have consequences much bigger than they seem. Historians still argue whether the story was originally a morality tale, political allegory, or simply entertainment for ancient audiences. As you settle in deeper, imagine the gods themselves chuckling softly as the tale repeats through time, a cosmic joke on human nature. The apple was never just fruit. It was a mirror reflecting everything from beauty and jealousy to fate and free will. So, next time you bite into an apple, you might think of Paris and his impossible choice. Maybe it'll make your snack feel a little more epic, and maybe a little more peaceful. The story, now winding down, leaves you with a gentle hum of ancient voices fading softly into the twilight of your mind. You've walked through palaces and battlefields, heard whispers of gods and mortals tangled in a web of fate and choice. Remember the golden apple, small, shiny, deceptively simple. It wasn't just a fruit tossed into a party of gods. It was a seed of discord, sprouting stories that stretched far beyond a single moment. Like a pebble dropped into a still pond, its ripples touched lives, shaped destinies, and inspired poets for thousands of years. Now, let your thoughts drift quietly to the afterglow of those ancient days. Picture the serene olive groves around Athens, the soft rustling of leaves under a warm sun. Hear the gentle lapping of waves along the Aegean shore. These peaceful scenes were the backdrop for stories of love and jealousy, honor and betrayal. There is comfort in the idea that the gods, those immortal beings who meddled and schemed, were also storytellers. Through their dramas, they offered lessons wrapped in myths, warnings cloaked in beauty, and a reminder of the fragile, wondrous human condition. You can almost feel the cool stone beneath your fingers, the faint scent of myrrh lingering in the air, and the soft murmur of a night breeze carrying the tales to your ears. As your eyes grow heavy, the myths settle like a gentle blanket, easing your mind from the busy day into restful calm. The gods' quarrel over a golden apple becomes less about conflict and more about connection, between past and present, myth and memory, sleep and waking. So, now, as your breathing slows and the world softens into shadow and quiet, carry this story with you like a soothing lullaby. Let the apple's tale remind you that even the smallest things, an object, a choice, a moment, can ripple through time in beautiful, unexpected ways. Rest easy, knowing the ancient myths will always be here, quietly waiting to welcome you back whenever you need a gentle escape. The night deepens, and the world grows still around you. Let the softness of these ancient stories wash over your thoughts like a slow, steady tide. The gods' voices fade into whispers, the echoes of distant laughter mingling with the rustling of olive branches in the breeze. Feel the calm settle into your limbs, the rhythm of your breath slowing with each inhale and exhale. There is no rush here, only the steady pulse of history's gentle heartbeat guiding you toward rest. As you close your eyes, imagine the soft glow of twilight filtering through ancient columns, the scent of warm earth and blooming flowers filling the air. You are safe, cradled in the stories that have traveled through millennia, meant to soothe and inspire. Let your mind wander without worry or urgency, drifting on the quiet currents of myth and memory. The golden apple story, with all its twists and turns, now rests peacefully, a quiet companion in the stillness of night. Sleep comes softly, a gentle friend embracing you with a whisper. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.